The chamber of the Galactic Council resonated with an air of timeless authority, its vaulted dome shimmering with the colors of hundreds of worlds, each represented by a delegate who carried centuries of assumed superiority. Voices murmured in layered tongues, filled with a casual disdain reserved for species deemed beneath consideration. At the center dais, the presiding elder raised a hand, silencing the hall as the latest subject was announced: Earth. To most, the very name was synonymous with obscurity, a world recently stumbling onto the interstellar stage, hardly worthy of a place among the storied civilizations gathered here. The reports circulated through the chamber described humanity as reckless, unruly, a species defined by its violent history. Their wars had burned continents, their rivalries had scarred oceans, and their achievements, though impressive for a young world, were dismissed as echoes of mistakes older civilizations had made millennia earlier. Delegates leaned close to one another, exchanging amused comments about how quickly Earth had rushed into the stars with fragile ships and crude weapons, unaware of the delicate balance of power that held the galaxy in uneasy peace. The humans had requested recognition as equals, pressing for fair trade rights, security assurances, and a seat at discussions that determined the fate of hundreds of systems. It was a bold demand, one that bordered on arrogance in the eyes of the Council. Many found humor in the thought, primitive bipeds daring to stand among ancient empires that had weathered eons of wars, plagues, and rivalries far beyond the scope of human imagination. To deny them seemed only natural, yet the sheer audacity of their request intrigued enough members to warrant a formal hearing. When the human envoy entered, the room quieted with a ripple of curiosity. The figure was unremarkable by galactic standards, lacking the ornate attire or radiant displays many species favored. No entourage followed, no dramatic flourish announced their arrival. The simplicity unsettled some. It suggested either ignorance of protocol or a confidence so deep it needed no embellishment. The envoy's face was calm, posture controlled, every gesture measured. They bowed respectfully, but not deeply, offering acknowledgement without submission. The presiding elder welcomed them with an indulgent tone, as one might address a child allowed to speak at the table of adults. Questions came swiftly, probing and mocking in equal measure. Why did Earth believe it deserved equal footing when its fleets were barely catalogued? How could a species that still bore the scars of internal conflict presume to influence the great powers? Did they not understand the fragility of their position, balanced between civilizations that could erase them with a single order? The envoy answered with restraint, speaking of cooperation, of humanity's commitment to peace, of their willingness to share discoveries and participate in the wider order with respect. The words were carefully chosen, earnest yet never groveling. The council responded with laughter disguised as polite commentary. Old species that had watched stars collapse scoffed at the idealism of a race still so fresh to the void. They pointed to humanity's record, to the brutality of their wars, to the savagery encoded in their history. Yet beneath the council's laughter lay an unspoken tension. Some among them had studied Earth more closely. They remembered reports of human adaptability, of their relentless drive to survive under impossible conditions, of their capacity to rebuild from devastation with speed that bordered on unnatural. They recalled how quickly humans had learned, how fiercely they had expanded once given even the smallest foothold. But these voices were drowned in the swell of arrogance filling the chamber, smothered by the collective certainty that humanity could be contained, directed, and if necessary, eliminated. The envoy listened to every slight, their expression unchanged, either angered nor intimidated. Observers noted the stillness in their eyes, a quiet that seemed almost predatory in contrast to the council's laughter. When asked if Earth would submit to oversight, the envoy merely inclined their head and offered the faintest of smiles. To most, it was a sign of acquiescence. To a few, it carried the weight of something unspoken, a warning hidden in plain sight. As the discussion drew to a close, the council moved toward consensus. Earth would be denied equal status, restricted in its expansion, and watched closely to prevent disruption of the delicate order. The decision felt inevitable, a reaffirmation of the hierarchy that had endured for centuries. The chamber, filled with beings who had never known true defeat, basked in their authority. The envoy bowed once more, thanking them for their consideration. Their words were humble, yet their tone held a cadence that lingered in the air, leaving unease in its wake. For all their dismissive certainty, a shadow of doubt touched a handful of delegates who wondered if they had misjudged the strange resilience of the species before them. But the moment passed quickly, buried beneath layers of arrogance and centuries of tradition. In the echoing silence that followed the envoy's departure, the council congratulated itself on maintaining order. None realized that the calm they so confidently misread was not submission, but restraint. Humanity had entered their chamber not as a supplicant, but as a quiet storm, waiting for the right moment to break. The chamber filled once more with the hum of overlapping voices, layered in languages that carried both mockery and disdain. The human envoy's measured departure had done little to curb the air of superiority that defined the council. Delegates leaned across their seats, recounting humanity's turbulent past as though reciting a litany of evidence that proved the species unworthy of consideration. They spoke of the world wars that scarred continents, of the reckless rush into nuclear brinkmanship, of the endless cycle of revolutions and rivalries that marked their brief recorded history. To them, Earth was a child species that had barely mastered its own aggression and now dared to stand among civilizations whose wisdom stretched across millennia. A matriarch from a crystalline world addressed the assembly, her voice resonating like glass struck by a hammer. She declared humanity incapable of restraint, pointing to their history of conquest and resource exploitation. A representative of a gas-giant civilization added that humans glorified destruction, elevating warriors and conquerors as heroes rather than lessons in caution. Laughter rippled through the chamber, as they dismissed the idea that such a species could wield influence responsibly on a galactic scale. The consensus grew: Earth's ambitions were dangerous not because of strength, but because of recklessness. Whispers of humanity's small fleets became a chorus of mockery. Reports of outdated hull designs and reliance on projectile weaponry were presented as proof that they lagged behind by centuries. Some compared them to archaeological curiosities, relics that had stumbled forward by chance rather than vision. The idea that these vessels could deter hostile incursions was met with derision, the words, fragile, and amateur, scattered across the discussions. Their military was spoken of as a spectacle rather than a threat, the kind of force meant to impress their own citizens rather than inspire fear among established powers. Despite the chorus of dismissal, there were uneasy murmurs from a minority. A few recalled studies of human adaptability, how quickly they learned from defeat, how fiercely they rebuilt after devastation. One delegate recounted how humanity had developed space-faring technology within mere generations, a pace considered dangerously fast. Another warned of their psychological resilience, their ability to endure trauma that would shatter most species. Yet each caution was drowned beneath laughter and jeers, as if the act of mocking humanity was a shield against doubt. The presiding elder called attention to the outer threat, a predator species that the council kept contained with great cost. With exaggerated gestures, he described how even their mighty fleets struggled to repel such incursions. He painted humanity as hopeless in the face of such adversaries, their outdated weapons useless against predators that fed on weakness. The implication was clear: if Earth could not defend itself against external dangers, it had no business claiming equal status within the galactic order. The envoys sat in silence through these debates, their expression unchanged. When addressed directly, they answered with politeness that bordered on unsettling. They acknowledged the Council's concerns, corrected small errors in their accounts of Earth's past, and spoke calmly of humanity's intent to cooperate, not dominate. Yet each correction was met with condescension, as though the act of speaking back was itself proof of arrogance. Delegates leaned back in their seats with indulgent smiles, confident that they had cornered humanity into admitting weakness. The decision took shape swiftly. Restrictions would be placed on human expansion beyond their home system. Trade agreements would be limited, regulated to prevent them from gaining influence. Surveillance would be established to monitor their fleets, and ensure they posed no disruption. To the Council, these measures were not acts of aggression but necessary precautions to keep an unstable species in check. They congratulated themselves on their foresight, confident that their verdict would remind humanity of its proper place. The envoy's silence persisted, but for the few attentive enough to watch closely, there was something in the set of their shoulders, a stillness that seemed deliberate rather than submissive. Their faint, almost imperceptible smile carried no trace of desperation, no plea for mercy. Instead, it hinted at patience, as if humanity had anticipated every word spoken in that chamber. When the elder announced the council's unanimous decision, applause filled the hall. Delegates exchanged nods, satisfied that order had been preserved. The envoy thanked them for their time in a voice that carried neither defeat nor protest. The words were simple, but the cadence lingered in the air like a shadow, drawing unease that most chose to ignore. They believed they had subdued ambition with decree, never realizing that in dismissing humanity so completely, they had only tightened the coil of something waiting to be released. In the aftermath, the chamber returned to its rhythm of debate and routine, confident that humanity had been put in its place. Yet behind the envoy's composed departure lay an unspoken truth. Earth had listened, endured, and remembered every insult, every doubt, every arrogant dismissal. And patience, for humanity, was never submission, it was preparation. The decision had barely been finalized when the envoy shifted slightly, the faintest gesture of defiance in a hall that believed itself unassailable. Without raising their voice, they requested the floor one final time. The presiding elder hesitated, amusement flickering across his features before granting permission, certain that nothing said could alter the verdict already sealed. Yet, as the envoy began to speak, the cadence of their words drained the arrogance from the chamber. "You believe you know us," the envoy said calmly, "but every word you have spoken reveals how little you understand." Their tone carried neither anger nor desperation, but a quiet weight that silenced the laughter and stilled the restless movement of delegates. What followed was not a plea but a statement, delivered with precision. Humanity, they explained, had lived under the constant threat of extinction by its own hand. They had fought wars so devastating that entire nations vanished, and yet they rebuilt, each collapse forging a resilience few could imagine. They had survived pandemics, famines, catastrophes that scarred their planet, and every time they emerged stronger, more determined. The envoy gestured, and a projection flickered into existence, showing the solar system in intricate detail. What appeared first was familiar to the Council: orbital stations, planetary defenses, fleets catalogued and dismissed as inadequate. But the image shifted, peeling back layers of concealment. Entire formations appeared where none had been recorded, fleets that had never been reported, shipyards concealed beneath asteroid belts and planetary shadows. The scale was staggering. Where the Council had believed a handful of fragile craft existed, thousands of warships stood ready, their designs alien to alien eyes, crafted not for ceremony but for brutal efficiency. Murmurs swept the chamber, disbelief clawing at certainty. Delegates leaned forward, demanding verification, insisting the projections must be falsified. The envoy allowed the protests to rise before cutting through them with measured words. "You see what we chose for you to see until now. What you dismissed as weakness was patience. What you mocked as ignorance was concealment. We do not reveal our full strength until necessity demands it." The images shifted again, this time showing weapons unlike those catalogued in the Council's records. Kinetic platforms capable of hurling projectiles at fractions of light speed, orbital arrays built not as deterrents but as executioners, fleets equipped with systems that pulsed with unfamiliar energy signatures. Each revelation struck harder than the last, eroding the certainty that had ruled the Council's judgment only moments before. A delegate demanded to know how such power could have been hidden from surveillance, their voice sharp with disbelief. The envoy answered without hesitation. Humanity had mastered misdirection long before it left its cradle. Deception had been a survival trait, honed through centuries of conflict. They had learned how to build in shadows, how to disguise progress behind civilian fronts, how to weaponize obscurity itself. "You saw only what we allowed you to see," the envoy continued, "because you never believed we were worth watching closely. Your arrogance built the perfect blind spot." The chamber, once filled with dismissive laughter, now buzzed with unease. The envoy's voice cut through again, steady and undeniable. We never sought conflict. We asked only for respect, for fair treatment, for recognition. You answered with mockery and restriction. Understand this, we are not here because we fear you. We are here because we chose restraint. But do not mistake restraint for weakness. Whispers turned to sharp exchanges as delegates argued among themselves. Some accused the envoy of bluffing, others demanded immediate investigation, while a growing number fell into uneasy silence, recognizing that the confidence radiating from the human was not a mask. The envoy let the turmoil continue before delivering the final words with iron certainty. We never wanted war. But we are ready for it. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in centuries, the council felt something they thought long buried, uncertainty before a species they had believed insignificant. And in that moment, they began to realize the gravity of their mistake. The silence lingered like a heavy weight over the chamber, broken only by the envoy's next command. With a flick of their hand, the projection expanded, no longer confined to the Sol system. Holograms mapped the edges of explored space, revealing movements the Council's vast intelligence networks had never detected. Dark fleets emerged from hidden orbits, vessels cloaked in electromagnetic silence, drifting like shadows along trade routes and border systems. Delegates leaned forward, their eyes widening as they recognized the unmistakable signature of encirclement. Humanity had not merely built a fleet, they had positioned it with strategic precision that bespoke long study of the Council itself. The envoy began to narrate with quiet authority. The images shifted to orbital railguns, colossal constructs embedded into Earth's moons and asteroid colonies, weapons built to hurl tungsten rods with such velocity that no shield could withstand them. Another sequence displayed artificial intelligence networks dedicated not to governance or convenience, but to war. Algorithms designed to infiltrate, disrupt, and dismantle enemy communications pulsed across the projection, their reach extending far beyond Sol. Delegates who prided themselves on cyber defense understood instantly. The Council's networks would not survive first contact with these systems. Panic rippled through the assembly. Voices rose in alarm as delegates demanded explanations, assurances, anything to reassert control. Yet the envoy did not yield to their noise. Their voice carried above the clamor, calm and cutting. You have spent centuries perfecting the art of stalemate, balancing power so that none may triumph. We learned a different lesson. We do not prolong wars. We do not seek balance. We end conflict so completely that it cannot begin again. The chamber erupted again, some shouting that humanity's claims were exaggerations, others hurling accusations of deception. Yet unease clung to every word, because the patterns displayed before them bore the stamp of cold, methodical planning. They could not deny the plausibility of fleets concealed in the shadows of uncharted regions, of weapons hidden under the guise of mining colonies, of strategies that turned obscurity into dominance. The envoy pressed forward, unveiling a doctrine alien to the Council's traditions. Humanity did not wage wars of attrition. They struck with overwhelming force, eliminating infrastructure, command, and morale in single, decisive campaigns. Every weapon displayed served that principle. Delegates stared in horrified fascination as simulations unfolded, Council fleets collapsing under sudden kinetic bombardments, communications blacking out in coordinated cyber assaults, supply lines severed before the first battle was joined. A representative of a predatory warrior species, long revered for its military traditions, snarled that humanity had no right to speak of superiority. The envoy met the outburst with unflinching calm. You glorify endless conflict. We abhor it. You fight for dominance. We fight to finish. That difference is why we are feared on our own world, and why you should reconsider what you provoke. The bluntness carried more weight than threats ever could. It was not boastful, it was fact. Whispers turned to chaos as factions formed within the Council. Some demanded preemptive strikes to contain humanity before their strength grew further, others insisted that such action would invite annihilation, while a few began quietly suggesting negotiation. The unity that had once mocked Earth splintered under the pressure of revelation. For the first time, the chamber trembled not with laughter, but with fear. The envoy allowed the discord to spiral before delivering a final layer of truth. Your surveillance was never outwitted by accident. Every leak, every fragment you saw, was deliberate. We let you think us weak because your arrogance blinded you. In truth, we have known your fleets, your stations, your vulnerabilities for decades. You look at us as if we are new to this galaxy. But we have been studying you since the day we stepped beyond our skies. The words struck like a blade. Delegates who had mocked humanity as reckless now understood that they themselves had been studied, catalogued, and prepared for. The balance of perception collapsed entirely. The envoy's gaze swept the chamber, meeting eyes filled with fear, outrage, and dawning respect. We came in good faith. You chose to test us. Remember this, our patience has limits, and when it ends, so does the war before it begins. The hall, once so quick to laughter, now simmered with dread. The arrogance that had defined the council fractured, replaced by the realization that they had awakened something they could not dismiss. Humanity had shown its teeth, and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The envoy stood unmoving as the chamber devolved into panic, voices colliding in a storm of fear and denial. When the din threatened to spiral out of control, a single word from them cut through the chaos. The tone was measured, yet absolute, forcing silence where shouts had reigned. Their gaze swept across the delegates, not pleading, not demanding, but holding them as if every mind in the chamber were pinned beneath the weight of certainty. You mistake our restraint for weakness, the envoy began, each syllable striking with precision. For centuries, we carried within us the memory of wars that nearly consumed our species. We swore to ourselves that we would never again unleash such destruction unless forced. Today you attempt to corner us, to diminish us, to bind us as if we were children. Understand now, those chains cannot hold. The projection shifted once more, displaying Terran fleets in motion. Vast armadas surged outward from the Sol system, vessels accelerating along trajectories that converged on disputed borders. Formations moved with synchronized discipline, no hesitation, no wasted motion. Delegates leaned forward in disbelief as the realization dawned. These ships were not preparing, they were already deployed. Humanity had anticipated this confrontation long before stepping into the chamber. The envoy's voice remained steady, carrying the cadence of inevitability. We came here offering cooperation. We sought equality, not dominion. Yet you mocked us, denied us, and threatened us. So now you will see us as we truly are. We do not seek conquest, but if we are pushed, we do not fight wars, we end them. Entire civilizations on our world tried to erase us. None succeeded. What chance do you believe you have? A silence hung heavy, broken only by the faint hiss of nervous breath from species that had not known fear in generations. The envoy pressed forward, each word deliberate. We know your fleets. We know your stations. We know your weaknesses. You believed us blind, yet it is you who have been exposed. Every insult spoken here was recorded. Every threat catalogued. Should the time come, we will not answer with words. We will answer with annihilation. The chamber trembled with the force of unspoken recognition. The council, once unshakable, now seemed fragile, brittle beneath the revelation that their power was no longer absolute. Some delegates whispered of negotiation, others sat rigid, faces drawn in pale fear. None dared laugh. None dared mock. The envoy leaned forward, their expression sharpened into iron resolve. This is your final warning. Treat us as equals, or prepare to witness what happens when humanity no longer restrains itself. We are not predators by choice. We are survivors forged in the crucible of extinction. Push us, and you will understand why our enemies never rise again. The projection concluded with one final image, Earth itself, blue and radiant against the void, fleets encircling it like guardians. Not a plea for peace, not a call for admiration, but a statement of defiance. This world, this people, would never bow. The envoy's eyes swept the chamber one last time. We did not come here to beg. We came here to warn. The choice is yours, respect or oblivion. No delegate dared speak as the envoy withdrew. The weight of their words lingered, pressing into every mind, a reminder that the order of the galaxy had shifted irrevocably. The Council, once so certain of its dominance, now sat in silence, confronted by a species it had dismissed as primitive. They had sought to bind humanity, but instead they had awakened it. And in that awakening, the galaxy glimpsed the truth: Earth would never kneel, and those who forced its hand would not survive the reckoning.